right. Calling the meeting of the Region 6. This says executive committee. That we are today. Executive committee meeting to order. Would you conduct a roll call, please?
I will do it. Billy Beal.
Here.
Jackie Davis.
Here.
Joel Griffin. Rob Cortell.
Here.
Jeff Spursky. Here. All right, we have one.
Okay, I'm not going to read all of this, but pursuant to Code of Virginia Title 2.2 Administration Government Chapter 37, Virginia Freedom of Information Act 2.2-3708.2, meetings held through electronic communication require certain provisions. We have two people who are participating remotely under those conditions. Billy Beal, who is unable to attend due to personal matter, and he is in Bowling Green, and Joel Griffin, the location is more than 60 miles from the principal residence in Stafford. Do I hear any conversation or objection to that? Okay, and we should probably take a vote on accepting that, right? Do I have a motion?
Move
to accept.
I'll second.
All right, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Nay. All right. All right, is there any public involvement or comment? None? Anybody online here? Okay, no. All right, let's go to the new business. Ian, well, no, we have presentation. Right? Oh, we have a consent agenda. All right, yes. So I need a motion to approve the minutes of February 13, 2023.
I can make that motion, but I was not here.
Yeah, neither said.
Is anybody here?
Billy.
Billy was.
Oh, I guess I can. I'll make
Okay.
the motion.
Okay. So moved, second?
I could do the same, but I was not here.
Just do it.
Okay.
I'll second it.
Second, all in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No problem. Passes. Presentations, Mason,
Hello.
on the update on the Talent Pathways Initiative, you're on. And
Great.
you're early.
I know. How about that? I
Yeah,
made it
man.
on time.
I told you. we
Wasn't running 15 minutes late.
Normally,
So, and we're just pulling up a quick couple slides.
Let me
try again. Hopefully I saved it correctly. Should just say like high level data point, like data points.
Okay, share it.
Morning, this is Joel Griffin. Just wanted to let you know I was here.
Hey, Joe.
Hey, Joel.
Hey, Joel.
Morning.
There we go. So just have a couple of quick slides updates. So let me tell you where we are in terms of activities. We spent a good portion of the month of May doing data polls, looking at not only your normal sources of government data like Bureau of Labor Statistics, but using Lightcast, which is, if you know the Lightcast tool, it's the combination of what was EMSI, MZ, and Burning Glass. Those two companies came together for one. So it really is I think, the best product for finding all kinds of data around employment, occupations, et cetera, job postings and listings. So real quickly, here's where we're at with this data poll. Again, I'm just giving you the high level stuff. If there's any specifics, we can discuss that. Right now, total population of just under 550,000. Population's increased in the region, region 8% over the last 5 years, and it's projected to grow an additional 9%. So you can see you have quite rapid population growth in the region. In terms of employment, right around 174,000 jobs, 2% increase over the last 5 years. Again, you're expected to see pretty rapid job growth over the next 5 years of right around 8%. However, as number of jobs have increased, labor force participation rates slightly decreased from 63 to 62%. And I would say, generally speaking, if you're following anything economically in the United States right now, one of the big issues everybody's grappling with is labor force participation. Your neighbor to the west, West Virginia, has the lowest statewide labor force participation rate of 55%. So you can tell it's a huge issue for them.
Isn't there a big disparity between male and female also?
Yes, we can talk more about that.
Well, but it's also age-related demographics.
Yeah, there's there's a whole bunch of different reasons. I will tell you, one of the issues I've really honed in on in my consulting is working age men.
Mhm.
We got a real problem in our country right now with male labor force participation. And if you look at men of color, Hispanic, African American, it's even more pronounced. But overall, and it's true with education too. We're seeing trends at community colleges like this and others where it's almost 2-1 female to male. At most colleges I know, community colleges I work with, it's at least 60-40 female to male. And some are even literally getting down to almost 2-1 female to male. So there's a real question in our country as to what are particular young men doing? They're not engaging in education, not engaging in
Video
employment.
games.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And I mean, we sort of joke about the video game issue, but it is a problem.
So let me ask a couple questions.
Absolutely.
So the population's going up over
Yes.
8%, but it's declining in many of the rural counties. So do you have a distribution map?
And I don't have that for this presentation,
I
but we are
believe most
going
of
to
that-
absolutely be looking.
I have to believe most of that is in Fredericksburg.
Yeah,
And I know we are, like Matthews, steadily declining. Gloucester is slightly increasing.
Mhm.
Lancaster and some of the others are slightly, but the other trend is the counties are all aging along the water, which is about half the counties in this region.
Yeah.
And that decreases workforce participation.
yeah,
And the number of kids is declining generally. So that's also will continue to decrease.
yeah.
And then you were talking about participation in the workforce. There is an underground economy, and I don't know if you can measure for that, but what we know is that nationally, what we know nationally is that Latinos have 3 times as many jobs as whites and decline as you go to other non-white sectors.
Mhm.
So, I mean, they work 3 jobs versus 1 job. So
Yeah,
it's,
and as you know, I mean, when you start
it's-
getting into issues too of immigration, whether, obviously if they are visa holders, that data gets captured, but if they're not here in any sort of visa or
well,
situation, it's hard to really capture.
well, the
that.
national data also shows we need about 4 to 5 million more immigrants than we
That's,
are
yeah,
taking in. We're missing that many
yeah, it's,
because of.
yeah, the whole
check
immigration
boxes.
piece
So, well,
is
the
gonna
immigration
be
is
another whole, yeah. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the interesting issues that I'm already starting to hone in now. So one thing I'll mention is in terms of the sequencing of our work, the first step was the demand. This is the labor demand side. We are just now working on the labor supply analysis, which is where we start to pull the demographic data, trends, commuting patterns, that sort of thing. So that will come next. So I don't have as much of that on this update because this really was focused. We started with the demand side employer. Because one of the things I should mention too is we're in the process now of scheduling roundtables and individual interviews. I'm going to be on the road here in the region pretty heavily in late June through mid-July. We're going to do, looks like 4 to 5 roundtables, and we're going to do a couple of manufacturing focused roundtables. We're going to do an IT roundtable, and it looks like probably 2 aquaculture related roundtables. I'll also say too, the nice thing about this timing is the Department of Labor has a grant opportunity out around quality jobs they've wanted a focus in climate resiliency, hospitality, or the care economy. And I've already talked to Jackie, she's an eligible applicant, and we're going to work on a grant connected to the TPI initiative, frankly, around the climate coastal resiliency on the aquaculture industry.
Well, now are you also going to do hospitality industry on that?
Well,
too?
right now we thought we would focus on the aquaculture issue and look at that. But
Well, I want to urge you to think about hospitality because I can tell you, Chinese, again, like Matthews, that is the primary.
yeah, we can look at that too.
Very
Yeah,
cool.
so Jackie, we can definitely look at that. So anyway, just to let you know, one of the things I'm working with Jackie and Ian on is what are there, there's so much federal money coming out now too. I think one of the real hopes that I've had for you all with this TPI and my commitment is that we'd also look for opportunities. I know there's the state funding that Ian talked about at your other meeting that hopefully is coming once budget issues get figured out. But there's lots of federal money being thrown around too. And I think the data and what we're learning even so far is going to be really helpful to inform potential federal grant applications as well. So I want to mention that. Next slide real quick.
One more clarification.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you're not able to measure the gig economy,
What do you mean by not?
part-time jobs.
No, we can, if it's covered employment or it's
Okay.
captured, we absolutely can
But
cover.
that's not covered.
That's the 1099.
The 1099s, we can still find some of that.
1099 requires you to have
Yeah.
a certain percentage. of
Right,
time.
right, absolutely. No, I mean, we can capture some of that.
I mean, I have 3 people working for me.
Yes, I know, I'm
all
the
under-
same.
all way under
I-
20 hours,
Oh, okay, yeah,
okay, but they're all part-time. And they make pretty decent money.
absolutely.
One guy is 80 years old
Yeah,
and they're not, I know they're not in there. There's no way to capture.
so real quick, these are the 6 target Go Virginia Region 6 target industries. Again, this is large, bigger picture. We're also going to be narrowing in. We've started narrowing in. You can see here, just generally speaking, this is the high level. We have all kinds of tables with all kinds of jobs that we've pulled. We ran Jackie through an example a few weeks ago of what we've pulled. I mean, we've pulled a lot of data already. But this is a quick high level snapshot of where we are with the 6 industries. And so you can see here when it comes, again, generally speaking, now aquaculture is sort of interesting because one of the things we're kind of doing, we're going a little bit off script. By that, I mean that if you go straight to the data that's specifically around aquaculture, you get a certain set of numbers, but I asked our folks to pull some environmental related employment down in the coastal area. So we're going to kind of see what that looks like because there's sort of a definition of aquaculture, but really aquaculture spans, and again, what I heard when I was at your meeting too, is that whole coastal resiliency piece. And I know Go Virginia's put some resources toward that coastal resilience effort too. So we're kind of looking at aquaculture, trying to kind of look at what's the environmental occupations and what's the environmental connection to aquaculture too. So we're doing a little bit of that. That's not necessarily reflected in these numbers. So we're thinking outside the box a little bit about that. But you can see here that 9% growth anticipated across these clusters for the next 10 years. To varying degrees. Again, there's your professional scientific technical service, which of course encompasses a lot of different things. And again, if we pull the individual tables, you can see what that looks like.
And there's nothing there on hospitality.
Yeah, because it's not one of the 6
Covered areas.
target. So we haven't pulled any of that data. We were asked to do the 6.
Yeah.
So next slide. Real quick.
Hey, Mason,
Yeah.
can you go back and,
Sure.
hey, what is in, I guess the number that in the aquaculture, seafood, commercial fishing, marine industries, that seems low to me.
Yeah.
And I just think about, the number of marinas that are in our footprint, the amount of commercial fishing that goes on down in Reedville, the whole seafood related oyster industry.
Yes.
I guess it just seems low, but
So let me, so this is an issue. I think this is probably an issue. Why don't we go ahead and go to the last slide, which I put together, which is.
Okay, thank you.
Issues. There's some early considerations that we're trying to work through right now. And we've talked to Jackie a little bit about this recently. So I think a couple of things there are already some themes that are emerging that we're gonna have to all work through together. One is obviously the residents employed outside the region. It's gonna be, there's some challenges to pulling commuting data, but clearly when you look at talent and talent development and talent pipelines, it's a factor we've got to look at. Then also one of the things we're looking at right now, this gets maybe to your comment, is that one question we just literally had for Jack and we were talking through is, you've got Region 6 based businesses that are hiring, but we're already also starting to see, because we've pulled job listing data. And when you start looking at the companies that are listing jobs and trying to recruit talent in Region 6, it's clear, like if you go down to Gloucester, you got companies on the Hampton Roads side that are trying to pull talent out of Region 6 to go there to work. Obviously,
Yeah.
Fredericksburg, we all know, is going as far north as Northern Virginia, where I come from. And so businesses are, we're seeing it already from the data we've pulled. Businesses are recruiting talent from outside the region. Now, your comment is because what we did is we pulled data, job data based on jobs in Region 6. So if the industry spans beyond Region 6,
Well, for example,
businesses, we did not pull that
well,
data.
in Gloucester, by the way, it's Gloucester, I have to keep.
I said Gloucester.
You said Gloucester.
Oh, sorry.
Yankees listeners. I
I know,
have
yeah.
a problem with one of my other consultants.
I'm
Gloucester,
from New England.
I know, I can, you're a Yankee.
You should
I
say
know.
Gloucester.
Oh, I know.
So-
I know it's called
Yeah.
Worcester in Massachusetts, by the way.
So, so for example,
Worcester.
again, in Matthews County and Gloucester County, a significant number of people commute down to the shipyards
Yes.
in Newport News.
Yes.
And it's actually very high paying jobs, and
Yes.
benefits and everything else. But I also happen to know that there are a lot of, a higher percentage of retirees in those counties along there in Lancaster and others, and that reduces the possible job market. So that,
Mhm.
again, the demographics are really key in these regions.
Yeah, and it's gonna
And
be,
the intra-regional.
and I think the business is recruiting talent from outside. It's gonna be, my guess is, I'm giving you a little preview of some things I think are gonna be issues that will be discussed in the final report. I think there's gonna be implications for Region 6-based businesses finding the talent they need because of pressures coming from outside the region that are pulling talent and can maybe pay better or provide, more better. I mean, what happens when you've got more of a rural-based business that maybe can only afford $13 an hour, and they're competing against a business down in Hampton Roads that can pay $25 an hour? I think that's going to be a real issue from talent pipeline kind of.
Well, and again, I know a younger number of young people who go down to
Yeah,
Newport News and outside.
yeah,
Housing,
Yeah,
Mason, housing's a big issue.
well, and things
Yeah, I'm
like
sure.
that.
As far as recruiting talent from outside the region, I have no place. We have a new guy starting in about 2 weeks. And it was just a miracle. He found a place to live.
Really?
Yeah.
Somebody told me in Matthews that
We have,
we were in a meeting, there are only 9 properties on the market in
Matthews right
Matthews.
wow.
I
I know one of
some
them.
people.
It's near
He's
me.
not Matthews.
Yeah.
He's near me.
Yeah.
Childcare.
Childcare too.
Yeah, both of the, not even housing, I mean, housing affordability is an issue also, but just the supply, like you're saying, just absolutely nothing available.
Anything.
Well,
Yeah.
and then this is also kind of dovetails with one of the other issues I have talked about ad nauseum here, which is that I think we should be doing remote work programs so people can work in Northern Virginia from Gloucester or Lancaster, or Matthews, so they can have a lifestyle.
We need to
as
get the
well.
internet in first before we can offer that.
Say what?
We need to get broadband in before we
But
can
we're
offer
working on
that.
High
that.
speed.
We in Matthews are.
Mike is
Well, it's
from-
another big issue for
But then
rural
this year-
areas.
Yeah, it's huge.
The broad-
Yeah.
Well, we would love to fund an incubator if we can find a space
Well,
somewhere.
but this is
out
a
of-
little different than an
Well,
incubator. I mean,
sure,
we-
right.
you know, we tried to do one up in Kilmarnock area and I mean, the reality is most people don't actually want to go to an office if they're living on the water someplace. They like to work, they just want to have good broadband so they can work from home.
Yeah.
There is
That's
there
true.
is a lady that put up with the old hotel there and she just sort of
And
did it.
Kilmarnock,
Yeah, and it's full.
yeah, there are people who
Totally
do.
amazed me.
Well, there are
Yeah.
people who do. and others who-
Co-working space?
Mhm.
Yeah, there's one in, the new one in Colonial Beach also,
Yeah,
Old
well,
Bank.
yeah, I'm not opposed to it. It's kind of different than an incubator though. It's co-working is a little.
Right, sure. Yeah.
So a couple other just quick things on early considerations, already again, some themes is what are the implications for growth in jobs, but at low overall total numbers? In other words, obviously, especially in some of the more rural counties, you see a lot of job titles with say under 10 that they need and that sort of thing. And so how do you sort of create a talent pipeline around I'll call it bundling of occupations, or it's really kind of a career pathways approach. And, so there's going to be some work we're going to have to do in this report and through this research, looking at, what are the kinds of strategies around, you have high growth, but they're low numbers, or particular occupations are in low numbers. But if you bundle them together, it's a lot more occupations and that sort of thing. And then the whole notion of occupations versus industries, obviously, we have the 6, IT is a perfect example, is, I think it's nationally 15% of IT workers actually work in the IT industry. I mean, IT workers work across multiple industries. So, we're going to have some discussion in this report around the target industries, but also then looking at occupations that might be growth occupations regardless. And IT is probably going to be the best example of occupational areas and how do you build talent around occupations regardless of what industry technically they may, in terms of the firm that they're working for.
So I'm gonna let you finish your whole presentation.
Yeah,
I only have like 7 minutes. So if there are other slides you want to show
No,
us.
we can back up to the one before. It was okay to just, this is just quick summary. Is the industry cluster again of the 6 was professional, scientific, and technical services. Top occupations within this cluster include software developers, management analysts, general operations managers, et
Well, and
cetera.
again, as project management specialists, I know
Yeah.
2 key people in Ian Matthews who work for federal firms up in Northern Virginia.
Yeah.
They're project management. They don't have to be there.
Right, exactly. And high industry cluster, the highest projected job growth percentage is information data centers and occupations in that cluster. You can see there, including customer service representatives and sales representatives and managers. And again, I already mentioned a number of the target occupations are found across multiple industry clusters. So that's a key theme that we're starting to hone in on.
So should this not say Go Virginia Region 6 target labor market snapshot or something? Because it is not the labor market snapshot.
It is target, correct. It's based on the 6.
It's the
Yeah.
6, yeah.
The 6 region. Or
Cluster,
the 6
cluster,
clusters, industry clusters.
yeah, which is about what percentage of the entire labor market?
Yeah.
What percentage?
Correct.
25%?
I don't know.
20%.
I'd have to look at the data.
I mean, it becomes really skewed as you get to Stafford, Fredericksburg. There's so many government jobs. That's the bulk of just
Yes.
that data in of itself. You can include that with the entire
Dahlgren is-
region, and that's
Dahlgren.
60,
Dahlgren
and then
too.
Dahlgren, right? To include federal and, include government jobs, defense related jobs. Those are 60 or so more percent.
Quick question, how, I mean, I know it's probably a longer story than we have time for, but how did you come up with your 6 industry clusters?
Well,
I was curious.
I wasn't here then, but
Okay.
so each region has a growth and diversification plan so we've had 2 iterations of that. We developed the first one in 2017. You have to develop those by statute. We had a consultant work on that.
Okay.
The full history of that, I'm not totally sure, but
I think
that's
what I can add, Mason, since I was here, maybe the only one that was here of this group, those represented the largest, I'll say, economic drivers in the region. Not so much jobs, but if you will, revenue or contribution to the economy of the regions.
Okay.
And that's how those were considered the clusters that we wanted to focus on to expand.
So were they not
but-
also, Billy, limited by the law itself, though? There's certain.
Well, correct, because that's
So
why
they couldn't.
hospitality
Right.
and tourism and some others that would be potentially big
Healthcare.
revenue drivers were excluded because of the way the Go Virginia law was drafted.
That's interesting, because that was one of the questions one of my staff had, is like, why
Yeah.
is healthcare, when we start pulling, then the healthcare numbers were huge.
Yeah.
And they were like, why isn't healthcare one of the target industries? I
yeah,
said,
so it has to be a service or product that can be sold out of the state or country. So
Oh.
healthcare can only qualify if you have something like a specialized cancer treatment center where folks from another state would come.
Okay, so it has to be traded outside of the state?
Yeah.
Or region.
Okay,
state or region.
Yeah, I think, and Go Virginia at its core is about being ready for outside companies to move here.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So
And
that's the
that-
whole.
Yeah, and
Yes.
that's how forestry and the aquaculture and marine fisheries really was
Okay.
what's driving was in there, because a lot of that product goes outside our region or outside the state.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. That's very helpful context. there.
Well, and when Go Virginia was started, it was right after the major sequestration.
Okay.
So, you know, the need to diversify the economy, get off the reliance on federal dollars,
Gotcha.
which is all come back around. So, and then VEDP was also kind of in shambles at the time. So the state, the Virginia Economic Development Partnership, so the state needed kind of another lead on economic development loan.
Okay.
And they
So,
were kind of
and I'll go on
themselves.
record as not accepting that it makes sense. I think it might have seemed to make sense at the time they did it, but I would observe that I would say that the law needs to be substantially rethought, as does Go Virginia. Because it, so,
So,
and you know, frankly, you could point out some of these kinds of disparities between reality and the intention. So it's worth pointing out that 80% of the jobs have nothing to do with Go Virginia by law, which is, you know, you don't have to express an opinion, but we can.
I was gonna say, it's not much. I do what I'm told by Jackie and Ian.
I mean, it's another conversation
The board.
for another
Well, it is,
day, but
yeah.
there are talks at the state board level about how do we include something like healthcare as an industry that Go Virginia funds,
Well,
especially innovation in healthcare.
But the problem
and
Ian, is
technology
they're gonna have to
commercialization.
fundamentally rethink Go Virginia. And the whole, I mean, I talked to Karen Merrick about what she's doing. You know, she's got all these portfolios under her. And it would drive me crazy because they don't make a lot of sense the way they're structured.
You know, and to me, like the healthcare is sort of like schools. If you don't have that fundamental element there, you're not gonna get any other growth. It's
Mhm.
gotta, it's like a baseline.
Yeah.
Like if Rappahannock General Hospital, what more we live,
Well, we
I
had,
don't know how many people would not be there.
we had this big VA center coming in too, right? So that's gonna
Mhm.
change the equation.
It's sort of like housing, schools. they're all there.
Well, the VA
I
is
mean,
gonna be extra.
The only other thing that I will say is in terms of healthcare, especially nursing, money for workforce, Jackie, maybe you can speak to this, but there's a lot of money available for workforce, for health, life sciences. So there would be a bit of a duplication
A
of
lot of federal
efforts.
money.
You have G3, you have Fast Forward, you have our funding. I mean, there's more than that out there.
Well,
Yeah.
DOL
There's a
just
lot.
had a grant, they just
Yeah.
put out a bunch of grant, HRSA just had an application that closed in May for nursing grants. The federal government's put a ton of money into nursing training, right? I'm sorry, Billy, did you have a yeah, I'm done. if
No,
you have-
no, I do not. Thank you.
All right.
Mason, I just have one
Yes.
quick, and you're probably over, but I wanted to ask that. Oh, you told me.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. So the manufacturing, the total number of jobs that we have, just in your experience, do you know how that compares, that total number to regions with a similar population?
I don't, but I could find that answer for
That
you.
would be
By
nice.
similar, you mean what?
A region with similar population to ours, how their overall,
By
What
demographics,
percentage you mean?
by just overall population,
by total number.
total population. Yeah.
But that wouldn't be relevant from population to population, because you might have a population of man, of which 62% are retired, not unlike around here.
We can look at work.
Well, we give a baseline.
Okay,
Yeah,
I'll look
just-
at work.
just
Yeah, I
any-
got what you're asking.
Any kind of orientation.
You're wondering what's sort of the impact of manufacturing within your region compared to similarly situated?
Mhm. I mean, my sense is that, you know, we have a very rural region and
Yeah.
manufacturing is a, you know, a very small portion of the employment in our region.
Yeah.
And perhaps that's because aquaculture is such a big part of, you know.
Although,
Don't know.
aquaculture is declining, part two.
Hey, Mason.
Yeah, I'll
I
tell you, the
do-
reason I'm sorry, the reason I was asked about the Go Virginia history, because again, when we were having our team meetings, we've been looking at aquaculture. and I've been getting the questions from somebody like, why is aquaculture on? Because and then if you look at the top two jobs, they're frankly lower paying jobs. It was And again, that's why I'm pulling the environmental stuff, trying to pull some of the environmental stuff into it, because the two jobs are like meat cutters and fish processor type job, you know, and they were like $12 an hour and $13 an hour jobs. And it's one of the reasons when the DOL grant, it's called critical, because it was all about job quality and higher earnings and stuff. I got thinking, well, maybe this is a way to sort of tie that in. And then what you have in aquaculture was a whole bunch of higher paying jobs, but less than 10 people in these jobs. And it was more the manager, supervisor type of jobs. And so the upward mobility, if you look at it kind of narrowly, is I work, you know, doing seafood processing or farming, and then the way I get paid more money is to move into a management or supervisory type of position. So we're kind of trying to look at how do we broaden that aquaculture look and see what is the upward mobility pathways within that industry.
Can I ask a question?
Billy, well, I mean, Billy was, let me get
Billy, go
Billy,
ahead.
Billy.
Yeah, Mason, how are I guess, the trends developed to determine what the jobs were going to be in 2032?
It's through a combination of federal government statistics, looking at, they do 10-year projections. And then we also pull Lightcast data as well, which they pull in a bunch of government and other kinds of data. So it's the way, it's a very imperfect science, as you might imagine, because a lot can happen in 10 years.
Yeah.
We wouldn't have imagined COVID, 10 years ago when we were looking at 2023 projections. But that's where it comes from, Billy. It's really a combination of, you can see in you probably can't read it, but it's US Bureau of, it's BLS data along with
Oh,
Lightcast.
okay. I
Is
got
where
it.
It's a combination of those two tools is what we're using. And that's really the best data we have. I mean, we're using what we have. But yeah, BLS does 10-year occupation projections. Again, we've used Lightcast to try to scrape and look at what's real time.
All right, thank you.
Joel has his hand.
Go ahead, yes, ma'am.
Joel has his hand
Oh,
raised.
Joel?
Yeah.
Joe, make sure your mic is on.
Yes, sir. Can you hear me now?
We can.
Yes.
Okay, terrific. So I noticed the aquaculture jobs actually go from 684 to 655. It's going in the other direction. Is that a typo or is that?
No, that's correct.
Like-
Both aquaculture and forestry are projected to decline in jobs over the next 10 years in the region.
And I assume marine industries doesn't include anything, well, there's no port here, so.
So
I have
then
a question on what-
related,
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Joel.
relatedly, someone mentioned earlier about hospitality, but is there any consideration for hospitality in the broader sense of Main Street, of, expanding broadband to the downtown areas, to restaurant and retail? Because we have growing jobs. We have a tremendous amount of people relocating to this area from the cities post-pandemic. A lot of people who, want to go to the beach and just, relax. Is there any thoughts to like broadband, or not broadband, but Main Street support as well?
Main Street support, Main Street would be probably defined out of these jobs, Joel, because, remember, they have to be importing other buyers from outside, basically, right? Or how does that work? What's the term again? Term of art?
Traded
Traded.
sectors.
Traded industries.
So, DHCD actually has another program for Main Street revitalization. In terms of broadband expansion, I know you weren't specifically asking about that, but Go Virginia does fund middle mile broadband expansion. Anything beyond that, it becomes funded by, another source, but DHCD does have the Main Street revitalization plan. And then, do you remember what Colonial Beach used?
I was gonna ask if that was Main Street or if that was.
They did use a Main Street program.
Yes.
So a lot of Colonial Beach's development has been funded by the state, by one of their Main Street programs.
They're doing a lot.
Yeah,
A lot. I was there this weekend. so.
they've leveraged that money over the past
Yes.
few years for a lot of their development.
Rebranding.
Restaurants, the co-working space, basically everything they've done.
But I think those things are not under the scope of the TPI.
No.
Definitely not. Nope. Yeah, not at all. Nope.
I had a quick
Well-
question about aquaculture. Are you also looking at the higher level, like scientific, because I know some of our aquaculture programs are looking at like what BIMS is doing, the higher level research behind oysters and the little reefs and that
Good
type of
question.
thing.
Well, you see, and this is, okay, so this is the challenge with all these kinds of things. So if you look at an industry, they have, obviously there's NAICS codes, which is the industry codes, and there's SOC, which is the standard occupation classification codes. And so what we have to do is we take the NAICS and we look at what SOC codes align to that NAICS. And so a researcher wouldn't align to an aquaculture, that would be a professional, under professional
Yeah.
scientific and technical services. So that's why I'm going to say again, this is just a first cut, and then we're going to have to try to be, and that's part of the purpose of the roundtables and interviews too, is to gain some insight into, hey, look at this or look at that, or here's how we look at aquaculture, and these are the kinds of jobs, and we can do those kinds of data pulls then to supplement the data. Just to give you an example, the top two, by far the top occupation in terms of number of jobs is fishing and hunting workers is the job title. It's 45-3031 is the SOC. That is currently 210 workers, and in 2032 is projected to be at 284 workers. And then the second one is meat, poultry, and fish cutters and trimmers, which currently is 106 jobs, but that's projected to decline to 83 workers.
Yeah.
So one of the interesting things about some of this too is, when we start talking about, and again, this is impossible for us to figure out, although we will address it in the final report, which is, all the things we're hearing around artificial intelligence and such. And so you take a job like a meat, fish cutter and trimmer, and you have to ask yourself at some point, does that get completely automated or mostly automated?
It's already.
Right, and so the reality is what kind of workers are you going to need? More of the IT type, they're going to be the robotics and the coders and things like that can keep the equipment running. Well, yeah, potentially, so,
Coding, you're using it.
right. So anyway, not to get down another whole set of discussion
Yeah.
points,
Yeah.
but yeah, those are the kinds of things we're going to need to supplement the data. We take a standard definition of what jobs are included in aquaculture, seafood, commercial fishing, marine, and again, and I've got all the data. If anybody wants the full data, the initial, and we can email them to the board, or if you want to peruse.
I'd love the slide.
I've got all the data files if you want to see the initial data pulls too, if you care.
What's that issue you alluded to earlier of occupation versus industry?
Yeah.
So that occupation may actually fall under aquaculture.
Right.
Yeah, using a NAICS code or something like
Right,
that, you may not be able
exactly.
to suss it out.
Yeah.
that's
So for
awesome.
instance, what we can probably do is we'll be able to look at the professional scientific technical and look at some of that, and see where some of those jobs are, and make some estimates as to, and that's why when I mentioned the environmental stuff,
Mhm.
because I'll call it coastal resiliency is not going to really probably likely, those occupations are not going to fit under this aquaculture definition. So that's why I said to our folks, I said, let's do some initial data pulls around environmental technicians maybe, or engineers. Let's take a look at some of those occupational titles around that coastal region and see what does it look like in terms of, I know you're doing even the wastewater the decentralized wastewater treatment, which I know quite a bit about that industry because that's my brother's industry, and I did some EPA. I did the same thing for the EPA. I did some career pathways work and stuff around decentralized wastewater. And so while not specifically related to aquaculture, we know, the whole issue of water runoff and nitrogen in the water and those kinds of things obviously influence the ability of the aquaculture industry to succeed. So we'll probably do some supplementation
Okay,
around that.
I'm just thinking, I don't know how you'd ever put me anywhere in any category.
It's hard.
I don't get any money from locally,
Yeah.
and nor does my wife.
Yeah.
Do you hire locally?
No,
Yeah,
I only
see, so
hire
we-
part-time weeders,
Yeah.
and if they get close to $600, that was the end.
That's the 1099.
Okay, any other questions or comments on the Talent Pathways Initiative? And what is the, when is this gonna be reported to us, or what's the?
The final?
Yeah.
Well, my contract runs through January 15th, but the goal is to have this wrapped up before the holidays.
So,
Right.
so,
That would be my goal.
I don't know what the report
December.
schedule is for meetings, but I assume we would have a final report.
So we'll have a.
Well, there'll be drafts for review.
But I mean,
And
maybe a whole conversation in the board.
sure, we'll have a December, we'll have our regional council meeting in December, but we also have it written in our application, not in the contract officially, but that we will have reviews monthly, quarterly,
Yeah.
informally or formally throughout
Well, I'm
the,
thinking it would be a good idea to maybe schedule to build some PR around the final report and really make that the gist of the meeting.
Yeah.
And see if we couldn't get it in like the local newspapers and get public comment on that.
Well, did we get the TPI picked up by the Freelance Star?
We did.
We did, yeah. But I think, so we're the first region to do this. So there are kind of two things at play. I think that once we get to the end of it, the state will give us some recognition for getting to the finish line first. There's also a bit of a reward in it, in that there's supposed to be this additional Go Virginia money allocated to talent pathways. We need to do this before we can access that.
Yeah.
So those.
But I'm actually talking about, I mean, I think all that's the right stuff to do, but I'm also thinking it would be really important to maybe get to all of the supervisors meetings in the region, make sure that people know this is coming up, make sure that their people are coming.
So I
I
have
mean,
a
we should plan on a big
suggestion.
meeting.
I still have a suggestion. How about if we do a joint board Cleo and Go Virginia?
A what? Can you speak up?
So I have a local elected officials consortium that is all the 16 jurisdictions that I serve. I also have a board. And Ian sits on that board as well.
Yeah,
We could have a joint Go Virginia board, my board and Cleo meeting, because my board and Cleo's meet together. We could do
What's
that
Cleo?
jointly.
What's Cleo?
Chief elected officials,
Yeah,
local elected.
We'd love to do that.
Chief local
Yeah,
elected.
that'd be
I
good.
think that's something we'd have
So-
to deviate off our schedule to meet the December, but maybe we could work with Mason to see.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I just say I'm
think that'd
committed.
be huge.
And we can deviate from ours also.
Okay, so Ian, that's your assignment.
So we
And
can
just so
work
you
on
all
that.
know, and Jackie, because I know Jackie knows this, but I'll say it to all of you, I'm committed to, just like I did today, their executive committees, board meeting, to do updates, give you updates on where we are in the process. You're all gonna be getting interviewed, most likely, I assume, individually interviewed and stuff. So, there'll be those opportunities too, but I'm more than committed to whatever periodic in-person updates you need or reports, if not in person. From a time schedule, we're doing all of the goal is to get all data collection done this summer. And then really have September, October, November for report drafting back and forth. Maybe there'll be sections that we could, send to you and you guys can review and ask questions and bring them back. I really want to have, a good 90 days of collaborative process so that you're getting the final product that you really want to expect. So,
There's a note like, when you do those round tables, you be looking at, or in the questioning, is there a way to, I know it's not to grow those industries, some of it is keeping people in that locale.
mhm.
Like, I know for our numbers for Lancaster County, census over census, 2020 to 2010, net, we lost about 600 net residents, which is substantial, but we had an influx of retirees. So our working class went down by like 960 people, which is 10% of our working class left the area. So anytime we want to get any growth in aquaculture, anything, number one is retain. Is there like something with the school system, like a joint accreditation with a trade or something that they can, they have dual enrollment at the governor's school. A lot of them graduate with associate's degrees, but is there something going the other way? I don't know.
Yeah.
But when
that's
you're
really
talking
great.
manufacturing aquaculture, I'd be curious what those people say about
Okay.
retention. It's easier to retain than to attract.
I would guess that of your 900 retirees, 25% have substantial outside income from other employment, like boards, things like that.
Yeah, they're retired, but they're of means.
Yes.
But it's really the 900 is the work, is the
So the income coming in.
55.
Yeah. Joel, do you have another question, or is that your hand? You didn't take your hand down.
No, it's a new one.
No, I actually have a couple of questions. So first of all, I agree with the gentleman who was just speaking. Fredericksburg has a similar situation where property values are skyrocketing, not because the high paying jobs are coming, but because people who are retiring and want to live in a walkable community are moving to the area, driving up property values, which means people who are maintaining 2-3 jobs and in some ways the working poor, so to speak, can't afford to live in the town they grew up in anymore and are having to move further and further away. So that's why I go back to how do we address some of those issues where labor is going down, but the amount of jobs is not, but it's somewhat disproportionate because the population changes. We have labor leaving, we have retirees moving in, and then we have unfilled jobs. And so I just want to know if the data is sort of accounting for that. I have a couple of other questions, but I'll let you speak to that one first.
Yes, I mean. as
By
I
the way,
mentioned-
we're running 17 minutes behind, so I just wanna,
Well, some of this.
I know, I'm just alerting you here.
Okay, yeah.
Real quick, I'll just say that, yes, we have not, as I mentioned, we have not we've just now starting to do the labor supply polls, data polls. So those are the kinds, I'm making notes to make sure that we do look at those. But we absolutely be looking at, Americans, the census data, other kinds of data sets that will try to tell, hopefully we'll see the story of what you're facing and as a result. Because again, the way we're staged in this TPI project is look at demand, look at supply, look at the education and training resources that help connect the supply and demand, and look at where are the strengths, where are the gaps, what are the recommendations for moving forward in terms of addressing any disconnect between the labor demand and the labor supply.
And just and Joel, one quick interjection here. Your comment, the two comments here, the ends here are actually underscore an important point, which is the region differs county by county. And what I think is important is to be able to show where the growth is happening and the loss is happening, things like that. Joel?
Absolutely. Just quickly, that was my second point, which is the Stafford Economic Development Authority would love to be a part of this, to be a data point for this, to provide a lot of information that we've already collected that we could share with this initiative. So that'll be my last comment. I know we're running tight on schedule.
Okay, great. Any others? All right, let's move on. Let's see, Ian, new business.
Thank you, Mason.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mason, yes.
So I was gonna do just kind of, we have new folks in the executive committee. I've done a one-on-one with these slides with Jeff. Joel and Jackie, I'll do it for your benefit. I think also maybe a refresher for Billy and Rob, but Mason, I think it might be kind of helpful for you as well. This is just kind of the canned presentation that we give to, local folks, anybody who are kind of educating on Go Virginia. So I won't go through it all, kind of skip around. We talked about this earlier, but this was just, why Go Virginia was founded, to diversify the economy in Virginia, to get off the reliance on federal dollars. The big piece, though, that's still central to Go Virginia that I think that I personally, I agree with Rob that there are several things about Go Virginia that are leave a little to be desired. But I think one of the really good things is the collaboration piece that it forces. I think that to be competitive in the 21st century world economy, especially in our region where we're dealing with smaller localities, we need folks to come together. We need the localities to come together. To even have a population to be able to be competitive. So that's really important. And I think, within that, it's kind of sub collaboration. bringing together all the parties. So, economic development folks, workforce development folks, and the business community all kind of together as one unit.
I apologize for interrupting you, but I just realized Billy's gonna drop off at 11. Are there any things on which we need to vote?
We do, yep. So
Let's
we can-
reorder this a little bit.
It's a good catch.
So we need to vote on so this is just a small capacity building budget amendment. It's more or less a formality to, my computer broke, needed a new one. We had the money in contingency, so we just need to move 2,500 from contingency to equipment, to get it approved, so.
Do I have a motion? Yeah,
I'll second.
second, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Billy?
Aye.
Opposed? No, passes. What else?
Great.
That's all the votes needed.
That was the only other action
Okay.
item.
All right, great.
Thank you, Billy.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Robert.
Yeah. All right. Is there anything you are particularly interested in before you evaporate there, Billy? Your mic's off.
No, sir. I'm fine. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Billy. Sarah, we'll go next slide. Okay, so, Go Virginia splits the region, or splits the state into 9 regions, so we're region 6, as you guys know. Every region has a support organization. GWRC, the George Washington Regional Commission, is our support org. And then we roll up to DHCD. DHCD has a state board.
I have a question. Are all the support organizations PDCs?
No, they're not. Some of them are just, so Reinvent HR in Hampton Roads region is more or less a nonprofit.
Virginia Tech.
Most of them actually aren't PDCs. So Virginia Tech is region 2. Region 1 is UVA WISE. Some of the regional economic development organizations are the support orgs. So there are probably only 2 where a PDC is the support org. So.
Thank you.
So this is just kind of, very briefly, broad overview of the executive committee, really just kind of pulled out from the bylaws. So basically the executive committee has all the powers that the regional council has. Primary role are these next 2. So the organizational direction, the bylaws, having the kind of initial input into the G&D plan. We'll be doing an update this year. So that's, one of the main things the executive committee does. And then reviewing and approving what are typically our enhanced capacity building, our planning projects, anything under $100,000. That's kind of the bread and butter of the executive committee. We have those come through on a rolling basis. So that's why the executive committee kind of plays that role. And then in cases where the regional council can't meet, we can't get a quorum, whatever it is, the executive committee, we can have ad hoc meetings to approve other projects that are typically outside of the planning side. This is kind of briefly the composition. So I'll get into this when we talk about the bylaws, but we have a chair and vice chair on the executive committee. So Billy's chair now, Rob is the vice chair, and then 3 members of the regional council that are nominated by the nominating committee and approved by the regional council. We basically can meet anytime outside the regional council meeting, so up to 8 meetings a year. 2 of those can be completely virtual, and then 1 member, so Jackie, can be completely virtual for 2 meetings out of the year and still vote. And that counts separately from her virtual participation in regional council meetings or other subcommittees as part of the region. So these are just, these are our types of grants, more or less, to the ECBs. Like I mentioned, these are anything under 100,000. These are our planning. Everything's currently in a 2-to-1 match. I'll talk about this later. It's almost certain that that's gonna revert back to a 1-to-1 match. Our implementation, our bigger grants, where we're actually, implementing something that we found in a planning grant. And then we also, so we'll go to the next slide. There's another pot of money referred to as statewide competitive funds. DHCD is reviewing how we make that program, how we provide more guidelines to that program. Now it's really, there's probably $10 million in that fund right now that's just not used for various reasons. So trying to figure out how we get folks to get behind using it. We have a few projects in the works. Region 5 is always a really good partner for us, especially on the aquaculture side, coastal resiliency piece. So we're looking at a few projects with them. Our current aquaculture internships program, we're looking to work with the Eastern Shore and expanding that program. So that would be an example of a statewide competitive. We're also looking to do infrastructure improvements to the Stafford Regional Airport, which would be a joint project with the Northern Go Virginia region. Slide. So these are just, these next two slides, we had this conversation earlier, but any project that Go Virginia is going to do has to fall into one of these investment areas. 90% of our projects fall within workforce and credentialing currently. That'll always probably be a majority of Go Virginia projects, but we're trying to diversify that. The next slide, Sarah.
So let me go back on site development. One of the problems with site development in a lot of the region is the lack of sewerage. And is there anything that you all are doing that we can do to help communities deal with that?
So we can fund, if you're developing a site that is 25 acres or more, or if it's smaller and it's regional, let's say, we're in Matthews, there are no sites around there, 25 acres, we need a 5-acre site. We can fund sewage to a site, we can fund electricity to a site, Any hard infrastructure that needs to go into an industrial site, we can fund.
I wonder how many counties know that.
King George knows it.
Okay, yeah, so I mentioned this, these are just the basic requirements, as you guys are kind of out in the community, if you talk to any folks about Go Virginia. So at least one of those priority investment areas, one of our industry clusters, which I think is on the next slide, but Mason we talked about earlier. And then the participation from at least 2 localities, so meaningful participation in 1 or 2 of those 3 ways. So in kind, match, cash. For every project we have, we set up an advisory council because we want there to be sustainability of that project. And that advisory council serves as the foundation for that project. Advisory councils are typically composed of local government folks, business folks, workforce development folks. So really kind of the core of the program.
Is there any sort of formality around those advisory councils, Ian? Like, do they meet whenever they're called? Do they meet periodically? Do they report back up?
So every project has a set of metrics that are baked into the contract. So we'll put that into a contract, we'll put that into a metric as part of the project, and they have to report on that every quarter to get their money.
And so the advisory council will presumably meet at least quarterly.
At least.
Okay,
Most of them meet monthly.
gotcha. Thank you.
Water is a principle.
Exogenous, you got the Potomac or you got the Rappahannock.
Or you've got the bay,
Yeah.
or the Piankatank.
Or the smaller ones that are the Rappahannock, absolutely.
But all of those counties along the water have issues around vast swaths of their land is taken out of the equation for environmental reasons.
I know this is gonna sound like a real newbie question. What is defined as the actual northern neck?
The piece between the Rappahannock at the top and
Westmoreland,
the.
Richmond,
Actually, Westmoreland
Yeah,
down.
yeah.
What's that?
Westmoreland,
That's all
Richmond
considered the
County,
Northern
Northumberland, like
Yeah.
sometimes King George, but sometimes not.
Well,
And
Uh,
Middle
technically,
Peninsula is,
Essex,
is
King
from-
William,
Yeah,
King
Yankee
William,
Tank.
Middlesex, Matthews, and Gloucester.
okay.
Yeah, it's Yankee.
So
So
neck.
if we went over the bridge and the Tappahannock.
So the difference
it would be-
between the north of the rivers, the northern neck, and south of the rivers, middle.
And
peninsula,
Greater
so-
Fredericksburg is Caroline, King George, Stafford.
Yeah,
spots.
gotcha, that's helpful.
Oh, that's the, but that's the Rappahannock in the
Yeah.
middle. Yeah.
In
Right.
between the two.
And the Potomac River's on the top, and the
Yeah.
Yankee Tank is right, the next one coming in. And then the
You
Mob
got the
Jack.
James further.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, the Mob Jack and then York, the York River, yeah.
And we always, you'll see this as you're looking at data, we always, look at the region, we look at the sub-regions of the region.
Mhm.
And, often our region doesn't, we've gotten to the point where there's collaboration out of the Stafford area, especially in workforce projects they've been really good about doing stuff that finds its way down to the northern neck and the middle peninsula. But, a lot of times our region doesn't make a ton of sense. Because that Fredericksburg, Stafford, I mean, that is northern
I
Virginia.
was gonna say, I get it, I know, I get it,
98%
believe
of
me.
the time, the region doesn't make any sense.
Yes.
And
Yeah,
so
no,
Stafford,
I-
Pennsylvania, and Caroline, they all have 95. So whatever happens in one can happen in the other within 30 minutes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the rest of us are hours and hours away.
Well, it's not unlike, I mean, almost anywhere you go in any state, in any country, in the country, you've got these sub-regions. I see it all the time. I mean, I lived in Utah for a number of years. It was like Salt Lake City and everybody else, nothing happens south of Point of the Mountain, on the way to Provo, No, I get it. And I've actually, we've talked a lot on our team about, as I've kind of tried to educate them, talking about Fredericksburg and that area and how, the growth and expense of Northern Virginia and Fairfax County and all that, how so many people now with the VRE and everything else are commuting up to DC.
Yeah.
From this area.
They
From
do
that part of the
Caroline,
region.
They do from Caroline too.
Yeah, absolutely. So
No,
I
the
get it.
region-
I get it.
These
Yeah,
are,
I'm-
when they did go Virginia, they were lazy. They just used the economic development regions essentially that the state had had for 100 years probably. And they really should have taken their brains and reconfigured it. So we had more, somehow like part of it's Hampton Roads and part of it's, up with.
Well, I will say, this is just my opinion, that the challenge rural areas always have those, they're schizophrenic. Because on the one hand, they want the growth, but then they're like, hey, I don't want too much growth because we'll lose what the flavor of our local communities and stuff. So I always feel like in rural areas, there's always that challenge when it comes to these kinds of discussions is how do you have enough jobs, but you don't want like too many, because
Well,
it can really lose the
Retirees.
flavor of the local
If they're
community.
retirees in there, they want to pull up the bridge.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like,
yeah.
it was like, they're like, not even like a normal demographic. They're like,
Yeah,
now that I'm here, all growth can stop.
We see it, in aquaculture, which relative to other industries has a
That's it.
pretty small footprint.
yeah.
Relative to high paying industries has a small footprint.
Okay.
Putting cages out in the river that people can see. People don't want that. So when we're visiting the oyster companies, that there are a lot of things that they're trying to do. They're still pretty minimal footprint, but they can't, local permitting, whatever it is. So,
But the planning commissions are working on to save the working waterfront. Because it can be taken over with residential like that if you're not careful.
oh, yeah.
Are you getting in some counties battles between retirees coming in and sort of the legacy family, so to speak, and feeling like the retirees are trying to
The
take
working
over?
waterfront would be that
That's
issue,
happening in
yeah.
some
So
Yeah,
areas.
there's-
I think a lot of the battles, certainly in my neck of the woods, are not, but the retirees are actually the ones who want to advance the county, grow the county, grow
Yeah.
services, grow.
Some, yeah.
But most who are educated, and I can tell you, I don't know any of my friends or retirees who wouldn't. The problem is you got a handful of local people who don't actually recognize what's happening, then the town is dying.
Yeah,
That's what is so unique, anywhere in the world, but
yeah,
in our region, go from county to county. So to Jeff's point, like when we were visiting aquaculture companies, a lot of the folks who were opposed to their growth were people who were retired there. But in Matthews, I've gone to a lot of EDA, Board of Supervisor meetings down there, and the retired community are the ones who are driving things. They're doing a lot of the development.
Yeah.
So it is just,
yeah.
that won't factor into your
Yeah,
data
but it's-
necessarily, but
but
it's an
it-
interesting
These are the
caveat.
kind of qualitative
It's not as
issues
black and
that-
white.
Well, some of it's pure politics too, you know, the demographics of retirees are changing the political landscape of some of these counties.
Yeah, sometimes for the better.
Certain counties,
But yeah, so these are, I won't go into, these are just some
Anyway, yeah.
industry clusters,
All right,
but
Chris.
these are just kind of, we'll skip these. We're gonna be talking about these when we do our G&D plan update. This is just, you guys already understand this. This is just our application process. We'll skip this. You guys know about all of our projects. So if you could just kind of go through them real quick, I'll see if there are any ones that I wanna, about that. About that. This, go back. This is the only thing that I'll highlight. So entrepreneurship is one of our investment areas. There's an initiative funded by Go Virginia called the Regional Entrepreneurship Initiative. Really catchy, trendy, cutting edge acronym. But every region basically has appointed an entity to run point on entrepreneurship. So it is kind of the convening organization for entrepreneurship. So the Fredericksburg Regional Alliance has more or less volunteered to take this on in our region. They are establishing a nonprofit called the River Regions Entrepreneurial something or another. But they're establishing a nonprofit to convene entrepreneurship for the entire Go Virginia region. So that nonprofit will have a board of directors and it will have an executive director. We should be approving their application in September. And we'd be looking at Q4, early Q1 to probably have an executive director, probably same timeframe to have a board for that organization. You'd be surprised in our region, even in the Fredericksburg area, Stafford area, the investor network relative to other parts in the state, very deficient. So.
That last thing we funded, that amazed me. I mean, the last thing that they did not have a better network than Fredericksburg and Stafford. I just assumed they would.
We did too, and now as we kind of we've looked at some reports on this, it's not where you would
I'm not
expect
sure why
it
you're
to be.
surprised.
Well, that could be a valid point too. Well, it just, looking at, let's say even like the Charlottesville area, well, one would assume the proximity to Northern Virginia that a place like Stafford would potentially be on par or past the Charlottesville
Well,
area.
here's the difference. The key factor in entrepreneurship funding, certainly not technical, but not always so technical, is the presence of a major university. So there are no major universities in the center of the state, in the center and east. So you've got Charlottesville and Tech, and then you have a couple not major, but significant universities in Richmond, and then you have ODU,
George Mason.
and Mason, on the other end.
What's Region 1? Like I have some friends out Region 1. Yeah, they've had such hardship.
Yeah.
I think that coalesced a lot of focus.
With Region 1?
It's
Deep
way western
southwest.
part.
That's wise. and-
South Wise, yeah.
Yeah, Wise, and they have UVA Wise here, but they focused so much out there because they had to.
Yeah.
There was like a laser focus on trying to get stuff going, and I don't know, do you have much interaction with them, or they
We do, we have good interaction with all the regions. Yeah, I mean, Region One, to your point, I think that there's this, ironic position where we're kind of in the middle where it's not great, but it's not as dire as they were.
Yeah.
And still are, really. The other thing too, they get a lot of the Appalachian money.
Yeah.
That's right.
So they get a lot of federal funds.
Is that what goes down to the corner of Virginia?
Uh-huh,
Yeah, okay. My farm is in that.
I mean,
okay,
And the big issue there is you can't, not only can you not get broadband, you can't get cell phone
Mhm.
through 90% of the land area virtually. I mean,
well,
it's really
and
amazing.
everything's so spread out. I mean, it's spread out in our region, but it's.
It's also up and down. So they have a geographic disability, just like ours is on the water and theirs is in the mountains.
It's true, yeah. But yeah, I mean, they still struggle quite a bit.
Yeah.
But they have done a really good job of
Okay.
bringing things along. I think that's it for that series.
Okay. Any more discussion of the
That's helpful.
it's great, yeah.
And everything else in the agenda are just discussion items, more or less. So these next two things are kind of important to have some input on. So anytime we do an update to the bylaws, I have to bring it to you guys 30 days before we vote on the actual update. So the first, I think we have just a very brief memo explaining what it would be, but it would basically change pursuant to the Code of Virginia, our quorum requirements from a majority to 1/3 of each body of the region. So that would be 1/3 of the regional council, the executive committee, and any other subcommittees that we have, like the nominating committee.
So we decrease the quorum.
Right. And that is compliant with state code.
Good.
And there's nothing specific in the code creating Go Virginia that requires us to have a majority.
Okay, great.
So we'll vote on that in July at the regional council meeting. The other thing is more of a discussion. Our current bylaws, and you see them in there, you don't have anything specific about chair, vice chair succession, and just, kind of good board management. I think it's bad board management not to have anything. So our idea is that chair, vice chair, each serve 2-year terms. Chair rolls off to immediate past chair, just becomes, a member of the regional council, and the vice chair moves up to chair. So the update to the bylaws would state just that.
So I better resign quickly.
And we have in the current situation, Billy has been the chair since Go Virginia started. Rob has been the vice chair for quite some time and has a lot of other obligations currently. So they would both be rolling off. So
At the same time?
well,
Is that
Billy will
wise?
stay on as chair to the end of the year. He,
And then how long does immediate pass stay on? Or
Uh,
does
what-
immediate pass go off?
I mean, immediate pass, which is, we don't necessarily have to have that designation, but they would just be a regular member of the regional council.
How long are the council terms?
They're 4 years,
4
right? Sarah?
years,
Yeah.
2 4-year terms.
So I'm not rolling with the council.
Yep. And Billy would not either, because your time as chair and your time as vice chair would not
Don't
count
count. as-
towards your 4-year terms.
Right. So we don't have anybody rolling off. We do need to, I say that it's an important discussion because we need to figure out folks who could serve the chair, vice chair role. And that's a discussion we have in the nominating committee, but I think that's also a pertinent discussion
Who's on the
for,
nominating committee?
Kim McClellan,
Kim
John
McClellan's the chair.
Savino, and Linda
Cam
Worrell.
McClellan,
Mhm.
who else?
John Savino,
and Linda Worrell.
Linda Worrell.
And they have to be private sector, I think.
Yes.
That's right. Yeah, so the chair and vice chair have to be private sector.
Sort of a fundamental question, Ian. with all these around the state, does each develop their own set of bylaws? It seems like there'd be some uniformity.
So there is, and when Go Virginia was started, they basically gave us this blueprint. And this is really, we've done some small updates, to my understanding, in the region, but this is kind of the blueprint that the HCD gave each region
Okay,
that we currently work off of.
so like these discussions now in secession, is that statewide or is that just
That's just
Region
us.
6?
That's just us, but I will say, other regions have been a little more proactive and already have this language.
I gotcha.
So they have very clear succession plans for their chair and vice chair. I think some other regions actually may have officers and they have official committees, industry committees. So that's something to think about. I think that's something that we've tried to do. Maybe the TPI is a path to do that, but
How many members do we, and positions do we have?
so we can have up to 25. We currently have 19 regional council members. So our conversation now is about how do we get more representation from the industries? And in the 4 investment areas. So workforce, I mean, we'll just say like 40% of our members are, we have a very good representation in workforce. The other thing that we wrestle with is having equal distribution across each of the subregions. Now it's 10, what was the breakdown? 10, 3. So we have 10 from Planning District 16. And then 9 from the other 2. And I
16
think-
is Fredericksburg.
And I think only 3 from
Is
the
that in the
middle.
packet? Could you, if that's not in the packet? could you make sure?
I've emailed it out after the last regional council meeting, but I can send it back to you.
Yeah,
guys.
if you
This
don't
is
mind.
our, absolutely not, this is our breakdown.
And what's the requirement to be non-governmental? Non-government agency? Is there one?
Private sector
Yeah,
or,
private sector.
yeah, so government, private sector or education, higher education or K through 12 are our other 2.
And what's our attendance generally?
We've had a little bit of trouble the last couple of meetings getting a quorum.
So remind me again, all of us again, what the requirement is to attend the meeting? If you're a member,
So you get 2 virtual meetings a year for one of the reasons stating in the FOIA guidelines. And then now we are trying to do 2 all virtual, which wouldn't count to your individual virtual meetings.
And-
We obviously had good attendance at the all virtual meetings.
Yeah.
Then we just did have a quorum and I'm having trouble with the July meeting that we're having I mean, we set out that doodle poll for like tons of dates and there was only the one date that we had the most people responding to come was our previously scheduled date.
So Rob, you as an individual member,
can miss 2.
you can do 2 virtual regional council meetings.
Yeah.
And you can do 2 virtual executive committee meetings.
Right.
And then we do 2 all virtual regional council meetings and then 2 all virtual executive committees.
However, in order to have a quorum, we have to have an in-person quorum for the in-person meetings.
Yeah. So that's our.
That's where we've been
And
having
then we
trouble.
have how many meetings a year of the whole council?
4,
So 2 of those can be virtual.
right, and we have
Right.
January 1 was, yeah. July was gonna be virtual, but we changed it because we needed to do the retreat for our G&D plan update, and we are getting a facilitator for that.
Well, this is the problem of all volunteer boards.
Yeah.
And state officials they're living in la la land.
Especially.
We
for
we
business women.
we agree. I mean, if we could, we should have done this meeting virtual today. It's just,
It's insanity.
we totally agree.
And that is state law.
Right.
Yes. They just updated it to allow us to have the 2 virtual. That wasn't an option after COVID, things reopened, so.
And it's obviously only, so we're not. Something in the code that requires us to have 4 meetings a year, regional council meetings. Same with the executive committee or any other subcommittees. The only time it's an issue, obviously, is when we have something to vote on, especially when we have applications to vote on. Because for the regional council, or for those that come to the regional council, they're coming there because they're reviewed quarterly by the state as well. So if they get pushed off by even a week here or there, they're pushed out another quarter.
Well, I mean, I personally favor hard dates because my calendar goes out 6 months to a year.
Well, and that's what, so this year we sent out all the regional council meetings, I think in October. We sent the dates out on the calendar because I wanted to get them.
Yeah, and they're in my calendar.
Yeah.
Those dates.
I don't know that, I think in the past they've been recurring and I don't like that because then you can't respond to the individual calendar dates, but yeah, so. The July meeting, I mean, that's a little bit of a different one. We're doing it at the Fredericksburg National Clubhouse. We're trying to get people to come. It's gonna be a longer thing, but the other thing that we're doing is planning a stakeholder meeting for the January 2024. And so that's we're trying to get industry partners, project sub-grantees from the whole region, not just the council there. So.
And I may be in Europe, so.
Lucky.
Yeah.
And what will happen is you'll do all that work and planning for months, there'll be some big blizzard that day.
Um,
So,
Well,
anyway.
yeah, I'm just thinking about how and I know you all are thinking about how
Yeah.
how do you get people?
Yeah.
There are reasons for people to be physically together maybe twice a year.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah.
But so those should be special meetings.
Yeah, and part of the one in July is to brainstorm ideas for projects, the future of where we want to go, that type of thing. So we thought that was better in person.
Except you gotta get them there.
Yep.
So in January, what we're trying to do is more or less like a summit, a quasi conference. And get people, for whatever reason, doesn't attract me, but people will almost always attend if there is some elected official there. So we're gonna try to get Spanberger, if not her, one of the folks in the General Assembly. Maybe elected official from each sub-region, but that's really kind of our, we get people there with the drink, with the refreshments the night before, a nice dinner, elected official the next day. Maybe have another keynote speaker who's pertinent to one of our areas, maybe an out-of-state person. We have some money for that. We've budgeted a decent amount of money for this. So that is hopefully something that we do annually. Region 3 does it. It's called an all-hands meeting, where everybody who's involved in economic development in their region comes together all at once.
So Ian, back to the question at hand as far as the session, and so sequence that for me, Billy's rolling off after December.
So
Okay.
Billy,
How about you? Are you,
I don't want to do it.
you want to do it? Okay.
Although you and I have a conversation.
sure.
It takes, there's so many meetings. And it's part of the problem.
Well, and you travel a lot.
And I have to drive all over the place.
So
But I think that's a problem for most business members.
Yes.
Like this is as good as it gets for me.
Yeah.
Vim's is a little farther away and I have to, but
If I were doing it, I'd be a terror because I would be going to Richmond to tell them they have to change the law about meetings and about what they're covering. So they would not want me to do that.
Well, we can have a conversation depending on who the person who comes in as chair about moving these executive committee meetings. We do the regional council meetings, we try to move them around the region. So it's kind of unavoidable doing those and having somebody drive kind of a far distance, so.
so is there anyone on that existing list that's not on the executive committee that's sort of entrenched? Like I told you, I'm still sort of figuring this out. It seems like a foreign language to me a little bit.
Yeah,
Because it's sort of so regimented, which I know it has to be.
sure.
But is there anyone that's sort of well versed that's existing on the board? I mean, I'm just trying to throw out ideas.
Well, There are a few things. So we have a few folks who are gonna be rolling off of the council completely. So Linda Worrell is one of those folks. She's a person with a lot of private sector experience. She's CEO of Chamber. She gets Go Virginia, but she's moving to North Carolina soon to live on the beach, probably. Lisa Hull would be great, but she's government. She couldn't do it. So say all that to say, no one outside of the folks on the executive committee who have the experience with Go Virginia to do it. Now, Johnny Ansavino has a lot of experience, but his background is mostly government. And he gets the program, he would be perfect, but because of the private sector requirement. Taryn and Lindsay, who are new to the council, if you just look at that body again, outside of the executive committee, who could be potential chairs, just because I know, Taryn has done it at the EDA. I know this is an area that's of interest to her. And then Lindsay just, she's government affairs at Rappahannock Electric Cooperative. She's their director. So she has the executive level experience to be able to do it. But outside of that, this is something that if we get heartburn about anything, this is kind of a major thing.
I think Kimberly Cullen's the other one, but her time commitment.
She
She's on
can't. she
every
won't do it.
board and
Yeah,
every
she's-
committee, but she knows Go Virginia and she's, but she's already said the time commitment would be too much.
Now, the caveat is that if we have somebody like that, it'd be a really good fit, but it's a time commitment. We talked to them about having more strict guidelines. So a 2-year term limit, maybe it becomes more attractive to them. I don't know.
But you're actually recruiting for 2 slots at once,
Yes.
because you're recruiting a vice chair who consents upfront to
Exactly.
be chair.
Right.
It's something that, the nominating committee, we have a long nominating committee meeting before the last regional council meeting, and it was a big topic, so.
Right, well, and perhaps we don't have that stipulation that a vice chair automatically rolls up to a chair, because to your point, Rob, you really are recruiting for 2 chairs simultaneously.
You're really recruiting for 4 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is pretty big ass.
At least the first time.
We would
Yeah,
just
for the
look at our
first time, yeah.
bylaws for
Well,
the
anyone
year.
who comes in
anyone
as
who comes on
vice,
as
Have
vice
your
is-
vice, you do
chair
2 years there too.
have
Right.
your Elections,
Yeah,
because somebody's gonna back out and be a vice chair.
that's a good point.
So I didn't, Jackie, could you?
We had our local elected officials, they have bylaws too, and that they were looking at their bylaws and they didn't like the fact that the vice chair rolled to be the chair the next year or whenever their term ended. They thought that it was best just to leave it as vice chair and have the separate elections.
Yeah, well, we'll put a bookmark in that, but that's something we're,
Maybe. I'm sure the governance committee talked about it, but come off the 2-year, maybe a year, and then I know some other boards have been on the vice chair. Is still subject to annual election. It's not a fait accompli that the vice chair becomes the chair.
Yeah.
But only, if they're good, it normally matriculates that way, but it's not like, that's sort of the best of both worlds. You always have an out, but
You could do your chair for 1-year term with up to 3 consecutive terms after.
Yeah, you could. do
Yeah.
one.
Oh, yeah.
your contract.
Yeah, 1-year terms, there you go.
Approve it here.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's a really good point. That's helpful.
I don't feel like we helped you at all.
No, I think
No, you-
you did.
That's,
So that was good. No, I
We
agree.
just defined the
Yeah, I
problem
feel
more.
like you-
all right, we're gonna finish
Anything else
early.
here?
I'm destined to do that. So let's get through it real quick. So we just have, the next things in here is information items. So the growth and diversification plan update. We have to update that by statute every 2 years. We have to do a major update. But we're in the 2nd year of the 2-year. We'll be doing a major update here in another few years. This update is small. Sarah, I don't know if you included the template.
Yes, it
You
is.
did? So
It's on the
you-
screen.
You see it in there. It's very straightforward. Just, where's the region? What are kind of broad level goals that we've set forth? how have we performed in achieving or working to achieve those goals? What are additional goals we're still working to achieve? Sarah mentioned in July, we're doing the council retreat. Sarah, do you want to kind of just briefly touch on that?
Sure, so we're gonna start, it's gonna be at the Fredericksburg Nationals Clubhouse, which is a really cool space. If you haven't been, we're gonna provide breakfast. We're gonna have our regional council meeting at the very beginning, which should be a short one. And then we are looking at we've spoken with a facilitator, Kara, what is Kara's last name? Parker. To come in and do sort of a networking, everyone get to know each other, board retreat. And then the second half of the board retreat is going through and brainstorming, throwing ideas on the board about, you know, the future of our region, what project ideas, areas we need to look at, maybe areas we need to move away from, so we can work on updating the actual G&T plan. So it's kind of a twofold. Lunch will be provided from 10 to 3. So I think
What's
it's
the
gonna
date
be
of that
good.
you're looking at?
July 24th.
So it's the same date our regional council
Yeah,
is scheduled for,
same
so it's
date.
already on folks'.
And it's just,
I need a birthday cake.
So-
My birthday's next
so it's from what time of day to what time of day?
10 to 3.
Delcator.
Sunday.
So, and there will be a virtual option for the regional council meeting in the AM, but for the actual retreat, we really need people there in person.
Could, do you have a tentative agenda?
Well, we just got done meeting with the facilitator on Friday, so we don't have a full, I can send you a tentative agenda. Yeah, I
That'd
can,
be helpful.
yeah, I can do that. And I was gonna send a reminder email out this afternoon to the full council asking for official, because I haven't gotten it, hardly anybody's replied to the calendar invite. So like I do with the link to the Google Doc, so that people can say if they're coming or not, or if they're just gonna be virtually at the regional council meeting, because we really need numbers. We need to know who all's coming. So,
Is there anything, Sarah, it sounds like you just add more work to it, but is there anything like advanced preparation for that meeting? So
Yes.
people aren't
Yes.
coming cold?
yes, and we'll send that out closer to the meeting. Kara will provide, I think a link for
Disc
the
assessment.
disc assessment, yeah.
So
for
even
everybody.
folks that
Yes.
participate virtually can do
Do that.
a free disc assessment. I know everybody's,
Let's see if it comes up the same thing.
I've done a few, but yeah, there'll be some free work and
Okay.
Yes, and we'll send the packet out early and everything, yeah. I mean, the actual, like I said, the actual regional council meeting shouldn't be too heavy, but we really want to focus on that, you know, sort of.
So I want to encourage you all to call every single member of the board and say you would like to know what they'd like to see on the agenda, what issues in their minds have arisen about how this all works, and encourage them to be there,
Yeah,
not just an email. I would call them up. Work.
that's a good point.
yeah, so I'm excited about it. I think it'll be really helpful and really good, and I think it'll be because also the other thing we've heard feedback on is people don't know everyone on the council, because we meet 4 times a year and sometimes everybody's not there, so this will be a good way for people that are there to get to know each other.
So I guess one question is whether you ought to present if you want to stay overnight option and have a, place for dinner or something too. I mean, dinner would be,
Yeah, so where we're having it, it's right by the Fredericksburg Expo Center. There's tons of hotels over there, so I can definitely get.
so is there a good hotel you could get a discount rate?
Yeah, that's what I can look into. We're already looking into it because we've got 3 options we're looking into for the January stakeholder meeting, and that's something we looked into for that, so that's easy.
Going back to the bylaws, talking about, in our board, we have the option for an alternate, and they would count towards the quantity. Do we have that for this?
There's nothing against it.
Because it may be something that because this is something that we have to, if you're not coming, please send an alternate, because it counts towards the quorum.
I want to.
Former alternate.
And by the way, I would
Yes.
not tell people that they can attend virtually unless they ask.
And I've done that too, that I don't make the virtual an option until we have.
But if they ask for it, you can say, of course, but we really would like you there personally.
Yeah.
You can't, you're your most trusted lieutenant, your alternative.
We need you, yeah,
Yeah,
that's a good point.
but that actually works.
But you may want to define it in the bylaws just so that they know it's an option, and just keep letting
Yeah.
them know it and let them know in the,
Yeah.
in the meetings.
Yeah, no, that's a good point to have it specifically in there.
Yes,
How does that work, Jessica? An alternate from your own organization?
Yep, so if you say I didn't come, I would send probably my business services or Stephen, my program specialist, I would send someone in my place.
although, I mean, for example,
For private, that would not work at
Yeah,
all.
you could send your, I'm sorry, I don't know what you do, but
I'm a banker.
so if you're the president, you could send the vice president. If that's something you could
Is
send.
that, I mean, it helps with quorum, but it seems like that'd be totally unfruitful.
I mean, I went as
Yes.
Ian's proxy to the last Bay consortium meeting, and I actually found it because they were talking about the TPI, they were talking about, so
I
I.
was texting her from Europe, I was like,
well,
yeah.
something like
these
this,
are the only things you can say.
Most of the time,
something
it's
like
somebody
this.
that you've worked with and they know a bit about the organization, so those two, that's why I would send those two, because they know about Go Virginia.
Yeah.
And we have discussions about how Go Virginia works into with the work that
Yeah.
we're doing.
Okay.
I found
and
it,
frankly, a lot of people like that, they go to it and say, oh, I didn't know that's what you were doing, and that's
Mhm.
cool, and maybe. Joel, do you have any comments? I'm sorry to not have called on you, but any comments on any of the conversation we're having?
No, well, the only comment I would make is I definitely agree that legislation needs to be updated to allow more participation remotely, because people just don't have time to disappear from their day job for almost an entire day because of a drive. So remote access is certainly something we should work with the state on, but the chairman, vice chairman debacle, I mean, again, I just think you have so many great people and so many talented people on this board, and the commitment level for the chair and vice chair, maybe if we define that a little bit better, maybe we'll get some people who are less reluctant to serve. Because I hear, it's too much work, but I mean, we have two staff, and I'm like most boards, the staff does all the work anyway. So really, what's the commitment level? So if we could define that, maybe that would help.
Well, and I think it's, probably you should define what the meetings are, because doesn't the chairman have to go to the state level meetings too? Oh, no, really?
No, so that's a really good point, Joel, defining that specifically. So I think Billy would tell you that generally is kind of a light lift. So the only requirement of the chair really is to chair our meetings, obviously. But any state meetings, generally the chair is not required to go to. There are state retreats that they request that we have members of the regional council with the preference towards the chair and the vice chair attend those, but there's no official requirement outside of chairing our
What
meetings.
happened to that last retreat? I mean, I agreed to go to that one, and then they got,
Well, they told us at the last minute that they just wanted staff there. They told us like the day before.
Yeah.
Okay. wow.
so,
That's good.
yeah, but why don't you send around what the key meetings are?
But I do think when someone agrees to be on a board, they know there's a certain level of commitment, and if they can't make that commitment, then
Mhm.
Well, I just want to say, when I was recruited, it was, there are 4 meetings a year.
right.
And then I was asked, did I want to be chairman? And I said, how many meetings? And it was like 8 more. And I said, no. But of course, as vice chair, I still have the same 8 meetings.
Right,
And you are correct, most of the work is done by the staff. But the reality is, the hardest part of all this is the travel.
and that's just the geography of our region, I think. that
Yes,
makes it more
and I think that's, and I think if you're committed, if you would like someone to be committed to the future of all this, and have a sense and a point of view about economic development. So it is potentially a platform to go change the way the law reads and how they think of it at the state level. Well, and I personally have opportunities to do that when Karen and I sit next to each other I'm on one of the Commonwealth boards too, but
Well, that'd be great. Yeah, I mean, we do have the most lenient, we've adopted the most lenient attendance requirements for the region. Yeah.
but even so, we don't get attendance.
Exactly. Yeah, no, we don't.
That's-
Yeah,
that's-
for sure.
That's a problem. So again, I just wanna, it sounds like you get the drift on the, going out to recruit people by phone to come to the meeting. I'd get it on the calendar right now. I would, tomorrow, I'd get on the phone.
Yeah.
Make a goal to have contacted everybody by the end of the week.
Yeah, I'll send the email out today and then we can start reaching out, especially if people haven't responded.
And that includes all of us, right?
Yeah.
Okay, anything else?
Just the project pipeline.
Yeah, nothing really. So project pipeline real quick. So mentioned trying to do King George site development project. Really just kind of waiting on the county to move forward with that. That would be their second industrial park, Stafford Regional Airport. Really just kind of waiting on some figures there to have a dollar estimate as to what that project would look like. The FRA entrepreneurship project, mentioned that. There is two other large projects, the statewide competitive that I mentioned. So VIMS is trying to do kind of a holistic project for aquaculture, commercial fishing that would primarily look at technology adoption for the industry. So Bill Walton is leading that venture. So and then I mentioned earlier the aquaculture internships project that'll be expanding.
So I'm struck by, so I'm involved with the STEM pathway project in Matthews to use oyster industry as sort of the anchor for all of these things. And Ian has been attending, thank you. And people from all around, they've gotten very good interest in it. And then they're doing the project up in the training project with the former Ballard guys.
With Jason Learning.
Yeah. And I just think that some of these things are projects that could be replicated all around the region. So Jason Learning's a great one. You know, they're doing all the work, somebody else is paying for it. And as Ian knows, I'd really like to get them to be part of this. Get Matthews to be a piece of that, but others could. So, I mean, I think we should be finding in here things that other people could replicate. And the VIMS project, of course, has scope way beyond, the bottom of the region, the Middle Peninsula.
Yeah, and then, so the VIMS project will be, Northern Neck, Middle Peninsula for our region, but also Eastern Shore will be involved in that project as well.
Right.
I'll put a plug in on Friday. This coming Friday, they're having an open house for the aquaculture internship program at the Glens campus. They had one this past Friday here. It was really cool.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed seeing what the students were doing and talking to the program coordinator. I would highly recommend attending.
Well, and these things are, they're kids who are interested in the physical business, and they're people who are interested in the physics of the business and water and science.
And the biology of it too.
Yeah, it was
So
really
these
fun.
are all very good.
Only other thing I'll highlight, so the state has their board meeting tomorrow. They're gonna be deciding on allocations for each region, which based on per capita basis will be not finalized until the state approves this budget. But this number, we're carrying over $330,662.13. They are suggesting that we get allocated a little over $1,048,000.
What do we normally get?
A little less, so we'll be getting less than, we're basically getting the same that we get every year. We're getting a little more than we got last year.
So what would you like to do?
Well, I mean,
you want to do, you're the board.
Projects.
yeah,
Ian is the planner.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's the thing, the statewide projects we were talking about, it would be big, would not come out of our per capita.
well, so when I came into this role, we had a lot of money that we hadn't spent. And that
And
was,
then the state stole it.
the state took some money back. Yeah, they recaptured some, which was reallocated to the TPI program.
Oh, there you go.
Ironically, so one of my main charges has been trying to deploy this money into the community. So we're holding an application session in August, holding another one in September, and we're gonna do good Lord, I have a stutter now. We're gonna do that quarterly with stakeholders in the region.
And how are you defining stakeholders?
So our communications distribution list are folks in workforce development, business community folks that we have a connection with, which is not where we want it to be. We hope the TPI pulls that out. And then local economic development folks and and then regional economic development folks.
But with the TPI funding, they never recapture the funding. It just keeps rolling over if you have it. And I think that's why the state recaptured money from some areas, right?
Mhm.
It's like you don't have any expiration date for our funding. We have it for 2 years and then the state recaptures anything after.
So Ian's charge is to spend it all
Yes.
Right.
before it gets caught.
Yeah, so, and that's,
Basically, you get obligated to projects.
Yeah.
exactly. And with our pipeline now, if some of them aren't statewide, we're in a position where we would be spending all of it, especially when you look at site development projects, because so much money goes into them, particularly when you look at hard infrastructure improvement to sites.
Yeah.
You know, I think that for our region, we could be allocated more. I think we've kind of built up some good momentum with our partners. I think that the localities understand the program better. You know, Northern Virginia gets 4.9 million. Obviously, they have way more people who live there, but you could argue there's way more opportunity for development in our region. So it's kind of that, you know, chicken or the egg type deal. So anyway, that is it.
Great. Any other items, Joel? Who is George Washington Region?
That's me.
just us.
Okay. Joel, anything else? Okay, know that I need a motion to adjourn, I think. Meeting's adjourned. Now, what is this about lunch? You feed?